Great to be here with you on this Wednesday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, BJ Bennett, glad you're making us a part of your day. So much to get to here on the show. Augusta Stone will join us with the state newspaper there in Columbia. We'll talk some South Carolina football with her as things have gotten real interesting there for Shane Beamer early on in camp, as they are just now a couple weeks out from their first game. So we'll get to that coming up a little bit later. Also, Nick Saban sounding off on a number of issues in regards to college football. We'll get to that coming up on the show as well. And speaking of issues, the University of Georgia putting out a little bit earlier this afternoon, Darnell Washington, about 30 minutes ago, so still breaking news. Darnell Washington and Tyke Smith, so an offensive and a defensive player, are each expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks minimum with foot injuries sustained in practice yesterday. 3 to 4 weeks minimum obviously puts you past the Clemson game. Both are unlikely to be available for Clemson. So you talk about that big matchup, missing a tight end. We'll see what happens with Arik Gilbert if he's back, able to go for Georgia, who's going to be dynamic. Could be without him, going to be without Darnell Washington, and could be without one of your starting safeties in the back in Tyke Smith, who a lot of folks were really excited about being a part of that secondary. So tough losses here with just a couple of weeks to go before the opening Saturday.
Yeah, you hate that for these guys. And, anytime you see injury news in preseason camp, you hope it doesn't result in missed game time. And obviously Georgia opens up with Clemson in just a couple of weeks. So based on the news we have right here, looks unlikely that those guys will be healthy, fully healthy, and able to play. And I think that's a big loss offensively. You talk about your starting tight end and a matchup problem, a guy that obviously has had a great preseason and is capable of putting up big numbers for you in the passing game, but also being an important blocker, Ben. And then you think about Smith transferring in from West Virginia, a guy who got some All-American attention last year. You think about him and Darion Kendrick coming in from Clemson as being boosts in that secondary where you just lost so much talent to the National Football League. And now you might not have him in week one. That's tough, especially when you think about who you're going up against, obviously, with DJ Uiagalelei and Clemson and those great playmakers. So you hate that for those guys. You wish them a speedy recovery, but that's always difficult news to see anytime, but especially this time of year as guys have gone through the entire preseason or, right there close to kickoff. And then to have those injuries is just really tough.
Yeah, Darnell Washington is going to hurt. With the offense that, as you mentioned, Kevin, what's going to be the status of Arik Gilbert? When is he going to be back? And he's got to get used to being in that offense. Tyke Smith was definitely a guy, BJ and Kevin, that was definitely bolstering the secondary that was replacing literally everybody that was there previously. These two injuries are going to hurt. But when people start saying they'll be back 3 to 4 weeks, no, they'll probably be. I think it said Tyke Smith has already had surgery. I don't even know what his injury was. But this is football. It started with George Pickens. Then when Arik Gilbert come, people just forget about George Pickens, right? Then they didn't have no secondary. You talk about Tyke Smith, coming over from West Virginia. You talk about Darion Kendrick coming over from Clemson. These are fill-in guys that you was looking to bolster a team that's looked upon to do some big time stuff in the postseason. But when people talk about college football and why you stockpile, this is why you do it. You go out there and try to get as many players at the same position as possible. That way, if something happens, that being injuries, your season isn't derailed. The thing about Georgia right now is these are key pieces. Tyke Smith is probably going to be harder to replace than Darnell Washington. I don't know how many targets Darnell was going to get. I know you hear a lot about JT Daniels and his ability to get the ball down the field, but two of your starting defensive backs, both were at different schools the previous year ago. The thing about Tyke Smith, he was going to be a guy looked upon to do a lot of things, play in the box, be that one high safety, come down and run supporter. Now you got to go with the backup. I just think that if you Georgia right now, you're thinking, what is going on? It's like I said, the injury bug is something that a lot of teams have to deal with. But that's what happens. I mean, Darnell Washington is a big boy, 6'7", 260. That's a lot of weight moving around, that big, that fast, that strong. But you wish those guys a healthy recovery. I ain't with this speedy recovery stuff because that's how guys stay injured. I understand what's at stake. I understand that this is supposed to be the best Georgia team, if you ask certain analysts, that we've seen in a long time. Definitely some consider it the best team Kirby Smart has ever had. But, yeah, BJ and Kevin, this is college football. Florida just lost their starting corner, not less than a week ago. Got to replace him. Georgia lost their starting receiver. Replace him with Eric Gilbert. He's not on the team. Just lost your starting tight end and your starting safety. The next man up sounds good until you that next man. It sounds good to say, right? Whoever is backing up these guys is going to be under a lot of pressure, but that's why you go to these schools. Even at full strength, this was going to be a hard Clemson team to beat. But you coming in, the walking wounded before you even kick the ball off, that doesn't bode well for a Georgia team that's still one of the best teams in the country, but they coming in a little shorthanded.
And this is a team that's beaten up a little bit. As you said, you mentioned George Pickens was already out. You lose two guys. They mentioned today your center is going to miss a little bit of time with a broken hand on a snap hand. So there's a lot of moving pieces, so to speak, there. Georgia has been said that's why you recruit well, BJ. But, man, you start talking about who's going to be tougher to replace. I would think, obviously, your every down safety as opposed to a tight end who may, has been said, get limited targets in this offense. But, again, that gives you 2 weeks where you're trying to install for Clemson to try to figure this out.
And you still potentially have a couple of playmakers who may not be fully healthy, in addition to the guys we've mentioned as well. But, yeah, you just hate it for them. And depth is so important. I mean, so important in college football over the duration of an entire season. Certainly when you think about the wear and tear that can happen from game to game over multiple months. But, to see this many injuries in fall camp when you're right on the brink of the season starting, man, you just hate it for these guys. And I do think, not having Smith, you're gonna have turnover in the secondary, regardless to begin with. Again, lost multiple picks out of that secondary to the NFL draft. But, now not having Smith, that's a big loss for even just a couple of weeks. Again, Clemson's going to throw the football downfield. That's who they are. This team with DJ Uiagalelei, Justin Ross, some of these playmakers. So the spotlight was already going to be on that Georgia secondary. But Ben, you make a good point about, wishing these guys a complete and full recovery when you think about the wear and tear that any and every season has on a student athlete that plays college football. But you always hate to see these news updates, these breaking news headlines when you're this close to the start of the season, especially. But yeah, these are impactful injuries ahead of Georgia's season opener.
And Ben, it's, as you know, it's virtually impossible to go through a season injury-free. I mean, those are things you hope, if you're going to sustain them, they happen maybe 3-4 weeks in, or as you said, right at the start, like with George Pickens, where you have time to adapt and try to overcome those things. But obviously, if you're Georgia, playing the schedule you're playing, it's going to be physical. Guys are going to get beaten and banged up a little bit. To have some guys out already, how tough is that when you're trying to prepare for week one and you're already going, man, let's hope we get through Clemson now, not too beaten and banged up at certain spots.
It definitely messes with your psyche. When you're that young and you're that impressionable and you trying to say to yourself, what separates the good from the great, is your mindset, is your confidence. And guys press. Like, the thing about it is when you talk about all these things in the media about what Georgia's supposed to do, Georgia, and I'm one of those guys, am I doing too much? Am I going a little harder than I should? The thing about football is you got to know when to let off the gas some. You got to know, okay, you can't do anymore. But the pressure that comes with being in these schools, I don't think people really understand it. It's so much more attention on them, not just individually, but collectively, head coach, position coaches, and these players, when they get hurt at another school that don't got all this fanfare, they can just go about their day. I can only imagine what Tyke and Darnell are thinking. Like, now they're blaming, and I got hurt. Like, as if to say it was anything you could have done to prevent it. It happens. But like you said, Kevin, if I'm on that team, I'm thinking, if I got to back up these guys, now I'm the starter, that's pressure on me. Then it's almost like I'm telling myself, all right, I can't get hurt. Because we hear 85 guys, right? How many of those guys play? We get caught up in the numbers game. You're injury away, whole season gone. One guy, depending on who that guy is. And I don't think that Georgia's there yet. But it's who gets injured and the impact they was gonna make. Well, you just lost one, you lost two on offense, you lost one on defense. I just think that this Georgia team, we're gonna learn a lot about them. I've already been BJ. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have used the Twitter sphere for my barometer. But Georgia fans are already saying, "Oh, this loss don't count. If Clemson beats them, guess the hell it do." Oh, yes, it do count too. You just wish it but that's what happens, right? The build up to the games is almost as big as the game these days, but you feel bad for them. I wish them a healthy recovery, because if they come back too early, they're only going to add more insult to this injury.
And again, that news coming out of Athens about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes ago. Now that you lose two guys for at least 3 to 4 weeks, both unlikely, in Tyke Smith, Darnell Washington for the Clemson game in week number 1. I guess you start hoping for week number 2 that maybe they could be. But it did say in the stories we saw minimum 3 to 4 weeks out. So that minimum obviously can be. There's a maximum on the other side somewhere until they come back. We'll have to wait and see how that continues to develop. We've got a lot to get to here on the show. Braves obviously continuing to play well while the rest of the East continues not to play well. Good for them. We'll get to that coming up here on the show. Also, Nick Saban really sounding off about a lot on college football. We'll get to some of what he had to say when we come back. We'll get to some other big topics coming up in the final hour of what Nick Saban had to say in regards to college football, and certainly college football here in 2021 and moving forward. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live also on ESPNCoastal.com, also live video on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can join us there as well. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Great to be here with you on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, thanks for making us a part of your day here on 3 and Out. Nick Saban sounded off on a number of topics. We kind of call it the state of college football because BJ, Ben, I know people go, well, Nick Saban. Well, Nick Saban right now is the guy that, if you want an opinion on college football, it's probably him or Dabo Swinney, right? That's the two guys you're getting a quote from. And Nick Saban did a well-extended interview, I believe, with ESPN's Mark Schlabach on a number of things. We're just going to hit on a couple of those and kind of get your thoughts on where Nick Saban's coming from here. And then we'll get some more of it a little bit later in the show. But he was asked about, does he expect to have full capacity stadiums without interruptions this season? And basically kind of gave I don't want to say a non-answer, but basically said that's above my pay grade, so to speak. He said somebody else is going to have to make that decision. Do you just let vaccinated people in? Do you let everybody in at your own risk? I don't know what they'll decide based on all that. I'd love to get back to normal, but somebody else has to make that decision. So kind of Nick Saban, I guess, basically saying, look, I'll do whatever they tell us to do. If we can have full stadiums, we'll do it. If we won't, we won't. But that's kind of sound like his take on that whole situation.
Well, and I think there's uncertainty there right now. I think there are some unknowns. I believe you've seen some sort of guidelines or restrictions put into place, perhaps with some Saturdays in the home stadiums for what we'll see moving forward. But, I think with this, you got to trust the medical professionals, right? I think you got to trust what the doctors and the medical professionals and the people who, study this for a living are saying and are advising and are, saying is the best, safest way to move forward. But yes, I think there are still unknowns there that we probably won't have answers to right up until the start of the season. And then keep in mind, once we get into the season, you may have some fluidity. You may have, circumstances that change. You may have rules that change. But I think you got to follow the medical guidance here.
Nick Saban understands that, like some of you said, Kevin, what he says goes viral. So he got to be very, 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 very careful with his words. That is the social media effect on everybody when you talking about big time sports. But Nick Saban is just trying to do his best to be able to say, listen, man, I'm going to do – that's kind of what he's saying, but I'm going to do whatever they tell us we can. And this thing, he has nothing to do with stadiums. He coaches the team. That would be whoever runs the stadium and things of that nature. Basically, he's saying, I would love to have it, but – I don't want to say I would love to have packed stadiums and we pack them, then something happens and they will come back to me. These guys are learning that, look, just mind you, whatever they want to do, not me, whatever they want to do, I'm fine with it. I coach the team. Ask me about the team and things I can control. And like I said, Nick Saban understands, look, man, he might not tweet, but he knows about going viral. And he's trying to be able to satisfy both roles at this point.
Yeah, again, asked about a number of things. What have you told your players about name, image, likeness? There, he said, what are you going to make on name, image? He said his players, and again, maybe this is not a message for college athletics, but for Nick Saban, his players. He said, what you're going to make on NIL is peanuts compared to what you can make if you develop a career as a player. So you've got to prioritize and understand that there's nothing different about this. The more value you create for yourself, the more opportunities you're going to get in NIL and more opportunities you're going to get relative to the next level. It still comes down to being the best player you can be. If you get distracted by that, then you're going to be really kind of penalizing yourself. I think there's really a couple of ways to look at that. Yeah, I think if you get caught up in it, you could take away from the product on the field. However, as we've seen, if you are really good at your name, image, and likeness, and you have a following, you may not need athletics at the end of the day. But I think for the vast majority, good words of advice there for Nick Saban.
Well, yeah, I think it's part of the process. And this is what we've talked about is how does name, image, likeness sort of blend in with everything else you're doing? I know, Ben, you've shared your perspective on just how immense the responsibilities are when you're a student athlete. You're so busy, your schedule's already so full, so much you have to do. And then you add this in and, it's a part of kind of the new iteration of college athletics. And I think those opportunities that are there for student athletes are great, are tremendous. I'm glad to see them become more commonplace. And I think this is a new opportunity that all student athletes should try to make the most of. But I think what Coach is saying there is, look, it's got to be part of what you do, right? When you look at the totality of, everything you have that you're responsible for. You got, you're playing football, in this case at Alabama. You're, a student at the University of Alabama. You have all the responsibilities that correspond there. You're talking about then, being a business extension or being a part of a marketing plan. So yeah, it's a lot, but I think these student athletes are doing a good job of managing it all. And I think it's going to become, as I said yesterday, more commonplace moving forward.
Yeah, Nick Saban is look. What he's preaching definitely makes sense when he said that the goal is to go out there to be the best player you can be. And if you do that, you got a chance. But that's the problem. Not everybody's going pro, even in Alabama. I mean, every last one of their draft eligible players are not getting drafted. So the thing is this. He's saying the more we take away from the main thing, it affects the main thing. And he knows that NIL is here. I got a quarterback that's going to make $1 million NIL, right? But what another thing people don't realize is all these things are monitored. Guys aren't just signing deals. I mean, I got an NIL deal last night in my DMs. No, it still has. While the NCAA, while the team cannot have nothing to do with the deal, they have to look at the deal to make sure. But I disagree when he says, if you just focus on being a great player. Look, man, I want to benefit from everything that's available to me in college. I mean, Nick Saban is benefiting from college. He gets, every time another coach gets an extension, he gets an extension, as long as it's a big-time coach. Any coach in the SEC and Dabo, he's going to get an extension. Dabo got an extension, he got an extension. Coach Orgeron got an extension, he got an extension. Dan Mullen just got an extension, he gets an extension. So I get what he's saying, but at the same time, something you said, Kevin, look, I better get as much as I can as fast as I can. Shout out to Hugh Douglas, because that just goes much farther than just the NFL. And it's easy. I know but it's easy for a coach like Nick Saban to say what he's saying. When my money goes up, even when I'm not at the negotiating table, it's built into my contract. So get as much as you can, but as long as it ain't taken away from the main thing, they're going to still beat the hell out of everybody. I don't think the play on the field going to suffer.
Well, I think he kind of talked about that as well in a follow-up to that. He said, well, how much are you spending, educating your players? They said, we have a department of guys that do that. And I think the best thing Nick Saban said about that was, just because you have a deal doesn't mean it's a good deal. Just because somebody puts it in front of you and says, hey, we want you to do this. And I know, Ben, I think that's the danger of it, is that you have college kids who's like, man, I don't have anything. And this guy said he'll give me $1,000. Well, what does that mean? And do you want your name associated with whatever they want to tie your name to at the end of the day? And I think that's probably, again, even on top of what we just talked about, to me, is if you're just out there looking for a deal, somebody might give you one. May not be a good one. It may be one that takes total advantage of you. Maybe one that is a company or a product or an institution that you don't want to be a part of, but you signed the papers anyway because you're looking at the dollar amount. And I think that's obviously what you worry about with kids, as you said, Ben, from the beginning. It's no different than any other 18 or 19-year-old kid that's not been in the business community going out and trying to sign a deal. And they're like, well, what does this mean? Well, all you see is the end result. I can come in and say, we're going to give you $10,000. He said $10,000. Don't read all the rest of that stuff that's in there. And all of a sudden you're going, uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that. So I think that, to me, is the monitoring and downside. If you want to talk about a downside of NIL, it's that. Yes, there's a good that you can go out and do that, but there's also a bad that if you don't read the fine print, you could find yourself in a rough situation from a contract standpoint, for maybe a company you don't want to be partnered up with, to what have you. And I think, to me, that is the most leery part I am of all the name, image, likeness, that there will be people that are simply selling something and flashing a dollar amount that may not actually exist in front of some of these kids to get them to tie in with whatever they're wanting them to tie into. And at the end of the day, it's just not in their best interest to do so, because you kind of get taken advantage of, because you're not, on any sense, business literate in a lot of ways. And again, I'm not saying that if you're 40, you're business literate, but you do have some experience with, contracts and things the older you get. That at 18, most kids at 18, the only contract they know about is the one for your cell phone, where they're like, if I break it, how much do I got to pay to get another phone? That's about the sum of it. If
that. Look, it's a learning curve, right? That we're talking about the learning curves. And Kevin, I think you bring up a great point. Financial literacy in business, most people are in it. They don't know either one. There are people in business that aren't good business people. There are people that make a lot of money that aren't financially literate. Now, you want to enter the business world. So for me, when I think about NIL, it's what you said with that contract. Everything you need to know in that contract is in that fine print. So now you got to go through a contract, every single line in this contract, meaning $10,000. Yeah, it's $10,000 if you're not late. Well, no, it's right there. You were late. What do you mean, man? No. And we made sure it was on your off day. You said this is your off day. Well, this is. But something came up. Listen, and if you're late, we get to take, $2,500 off the top. Yeah. Now, we said if you were late and you gave us attitude. What? I'm telling y'all, you got to, and something Kevin, me and BJ talked about. There is no market because the market has to create. There isn't one to go off of, right? So whatever we decide to give them, that's what you worth. Like when people go, is Nick Saban worth $10 million? Yep, because he's getting it. Because he's getting the 10. So I think the players got to understand this. Man, you are getting what you're getting half because of you and half because of where you are. Because I'm telling you, Trevor Lawrence can't benefit, gone. Kyle Pitts can't benefit, gone. Y'all guys coming behind them can benefit. And while it's all great, you're gonna have to meet those. You're gonna have to meet those contract demands. I'm telling you, whatever that contract say. And once again, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney's of the world, they're saying, listen, you guys are off Saturday, but we kind of want y'all to come in and watch the film. I'm telling you, this thing is gonna be, it's gonna get ugly because somebody said this. I will believe Bryce Young will get $1 million when I see the $1 million. I will believe he's gonna get it when he gets it. Because until he gets it, he ain't got it. And I'm gonna have to see it.
So we'll weigh in. Nick Saban got into much more than just name, image, likeness, and things that talked about college football expansion, where it's headed, things of that nature. We'll get to that coming up a little bit later in the show. But when we come back, we'll talk actual on the field football. South Carolina, an interesting spot. Luke Doty already with a little bit of an injury. South Carolina pulls up a grad assistant, puts him on the active roster. Now he's one of their quarterbacks and getting very thin at quarterback depth. We'll talk to Augusta Stone of the State newspaper when we come back. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on 3 and Out on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben counted down towards the start of the college football season. South Carolina, like a number of teams, trying to make sure they get to the first game healthy. Sometimes easier said than done. Joining us here from the state newspaper, Augusta Stone steps in here on 3 and Out. Augusta, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing fantastic. And obviously, Shane Beamer is going through some stuff here as his first go around as head coach. Luke Doty banged up. They've had to bring a graduate transfer, or a grad assistant rather, up onto the active roster to help with quarterback depth. Where are they at a couple weeks out from the opener in terms of their quarterback situation?
You know, Shane Beamer, he wanted to make it very clear yesterday. He actually made a surprise appearance at media. We weren't expecting to see him, just a bunch of offensive players. He rushed in for a second and gave us an update, wanted to let us know, it's not on fire. Everything's okay, but they are not super deep right now. So now that Luke Doty's down, they have these three very inexperienced guys. They had Connor Jordan and Colton Gauthier and all these names that a lot of people don't really know unless you really follow South Carolina closely. And so they had a grad assistant, out there. He still had some eligibility left. Zeb Nolan. He played most recently at North Dakota State behind Trey Lance. So he has some backup experience, but he was out there, throwing passes. Beamer wanted to make it very clear. He was like, I wasn't going down, to the bars and trying to find some guy who played high school quarterback. I really wanted to, have a guy to just sharpen everybody out. But it's an interesting situation for sure. I mean, it's a tough place to be in less than 3 weeks out of the first year coach, whenever the guy that you had made your starter, Luke Doty was the guy, and then has his foot injury. He's in a cast. We saw him yesterday scooting around at media. So, they're optimistic that he might be back by game one, but honestly, it's hard to tell what's going on in the quarterback room right now.
Augusta, what's this move been like for Zeb Nolan, going from, hey, I'm a grad assistant, to now I'm, a part of the roster as a quarterback? What's this been like for him?
We didn't get a chance to talk with him yesterday, but we heard from everybody around him. They said it seems pretty smooth. They were watching some highlights of him, during his time. He also played at Iowa State and played a game against Oklahoma and did really well. So, I don't think it's been a super hard transition for him. It's kind of funny. It seems random, but it seems like the coaching staff and, the quarterbacks kind of had a little bit more of an idea that it was a possibility, that he could, just go out there, put on a jersey and start throwing balls with them. It's interesting that he has probably more in-game experience than all the other guys on the roster combined. While at, Iowa State for a little bit and then at the FCS level, I don't think it's a huge transition. I wonder, if part of it, when he came here, they were like, hey, maybe when they brought him over in June, this might be an opportunity for you. I don't know where the certainty was at that point, but with how thin they are, especially compared to other SEC programs, Shane Beamer he was at Georgia a couple of years ago, and he was like, we'd have 5 or 6 guys out there, and South Carolina, they got their force from their GA going out there. So it's just limited, it's just thin. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Augusta, one thing that I did hear that Coach Beamer did say, he goes, don't get it twisted, because Zeb is here. It's still all about the competition. If he's the best guy for us, he's gonna start. If he's not, he won't. Just talk about him letting you guys know, listen, nothing is on fire. We're gonna be just fine. We just get to add a guy who just happens to have more experience than any quarterback we have on the roster right now.
100%. That's what he said. That's what he wanted to make clear. He was like, if worse comes to worse, he's competing with everybody else, and he's making them more competitive. But it's telling. It is telling in a way whenever you promote, or I don't know if you call it a promotion. I've been struggling that. Is it a promotion? Is it a move over? I don't know what you are when you're a GA and then you just get moved onto the roster like that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's very interesting. And I will say, the guy who's probably going to start at center was snapping to Zeb in some drills yesterday, and I was kind of like, why is Eric Douglas out there snapping to the GA? Like, I don't know. It's and then they ran some plays, and it was Jason Brown was was presumably the guy behind Doty, but it's interesting, you know. I mean, I don't think they have a solid, like, you know, second, third, fourth string. I think it's kind of anyone's game, and we will be as surprised as anybody come September 4th, I'm sure.
Augusta Stone joining us here on 3 Now. Now they open up, obviously, Eastern Illinois. You figured that's a game they should win, but then it's East Carolina and Georgia right after that. So how are they using the rest of this time here to develop who their guy's going to be potentially that goes out there and takes snaps at quarterback, and what do they want their offense to kind of be before they get to the SEC schedule?
I think more than anything, you know, knowing the quarterback situation, you know, knowing some of the receiver, you know, things that they have to work through right there, don't have a ton of experience there either. I think they're hoping desperately that Kevin Harris comes back. You know, he returns the most rushing yards of any SEC running back from last year. The only guy who got more yards than him last year was Najee Harris. So Kevin Harris, he's a big factor of that offense, you know, and getting the rushing game established. The issue is he's also not practicing right now. He had a back procedure. They told us it was minor, and, you know, he'd be back. He wasn't at practice yesterday, so not sure when he'll be fully healthy. You know, he's obviously not too hurt, but, I mean, I would say a lot of South Carolina's offense this year is going to be focused around running, because if you don't know who your quarterback's going to be, you need to lean on your backs a little bit. You know, they also have Marshawn Lloyd. I think he'll be making a difference. They're really excited about him and just a couple other guys. But honestly, like they need Kevin Harris back. I think that's the biggest factor, especially before they go to Georgia.
Defensively, a lot of talent on this defensive line. How good could that front be?
Absolutely. That if I'm talking South Carolina football and I want to be really optimistic, that is 100% where I'm focusing all of my energy right there. JJ Enagbare, Kingsley, but they call him JJ. He's going to be an absolute game changer. You know, he was getting all of those preseason awards, and he's confident as ever. They're really clicking on defensive line. You know, they also have Zach Pickens to be excited about, and they have Jordan Birch and all these. If anything is going to go really well for South Carolina this year, it's going to be the defensive line, and they have a lot of room to make up. You know, last year they weren't exceptional last year, so if they're hoping for anything, they're hoping to be a little bit more staunch there, especially when it comes to the SEC.
What has been the move with a guy like Coach Beamer, who made it known in this preliminary press conference that, look, he always wanted to be the head coach at South Carolina, even when he admitted that when he was at OU, I got the TV on, it's on the SEC network, I'm watching what's going on. What has been his mood since he's been there? And obviously he doesn't lack confidence.
He could not be more excited to be here. I mean, you said it yourself. I think Shane Beamer, the best thing going for him is just his excitement. It's infectious, you know, and you can tell the team has really bought into his message. One of the things I love most about Beamer, just from the conversations that we've been able to have with him and the appearances we've had with him and all this stuff, is he really, really focuses on putting the player first, and, you know, that the relationship development and everything. And when you're dealing with South Carolina, you know, coming off last year 2-8 season, didn't make it to the bowl because of the COVID and all of that, they really do believe, you know, I can't remember who it was, but I was with one of the players at Media Days, and he said, you know, we were at a point where we just needed something to latch on to, you know, after Muschamp left and we were in all this, you know, just a mess. We needed someone that we could get behind. And that's who Beamer has been for them. I think he's been that for the fan base. I think, you know, they're excited to have Shane Beamer there, and he couldn't be more excited to be there. So if there's, you know, as much as there's turmoil with injuries and, you know, who's going to be the quarterback and is Kevin Harris okay? And the defensive backs are a bit of a mess as well. You know, they had some transfers and some injuries there, but at the core of it, they really do believe in each other, and that's going to take them, you know, through as far as it can, I think, in the SEC, and that's exciting to see.
It's really interesting because you mentioned, you know, some of those questions, but from afar, at least, it really feels like this is a program that has a lot of momentum. Are you seeing that on campus around this program?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. You know, with as much as Beamer's dealing with, he has brought over a ton of talent. You know, he was picking from the transfer portal like crazy, and he retained a lot of talent as well. You know, a lot of guys who could have left have decided to stay around the program. And I'm not saying that this year is going to be, you know, the year that South Carolina wants. And I've seen the over-unders on their win losses, and, you know, it's 3.5, and that's not great. And they may not make it to a bowl. We don't know. I mean, I could see if they give Beamer a solid shot here. You know, he has the passion, he has the excitement around the program for sure. You know, give it a couple years. I would say give it a couple years. Let him develop, especially offensive identity, because right now I feel like that's where they're just a little most lost, if most lost anywhere. But yeah, I would say, you know, keep it optimistic. You know, give him 3, 4, 5 years if he gets that. I think that could be exciting. You know, he really wants to be here, and that's part of the battle.
Augusta Stone joining us here on 3 and Out from the State newspaper. Our guest here, Augusta, we really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it. We'll do. Augusta Stone joining us here in South Carolina. Obviously, the focus on their quarterback defense. BJ looks to be in good shape, as she said there. But you open up against Eastern Illinois. That should be a W right out of the gate. Then you get a tricky East Carolina team, which if South Carolina is not up to speed in certain areas, BJ could certainly lose that game. Then you jump right in feet first against Georgia right after that. So right out of the gate, South Carolina has got a lot of things they need to get figured out over the next couple of weeks here.
Well, and I agree with Augusta. I think we all do when you talk about South Carolina's success. Kevin Harris. I mean, Kevin Harris is, I think, the best running back in the SEC, one of the best running backs in the country. A guy that, again, had more rushing yards per game than Najee Harris last year. And Ben, he's if he's not 100%, and again, we don't know, we'll see moving forward with that procedure. That's just another question. But if he is, I think as Kevin proved last year, this is a guy you turn around and give the ball to 20, 22, 25 times a game, especially with the uncertainty you have at quarterback right now.
Yeah, Kevin Harris. I mean, BJ, if he was able to go out there and really earn every single thing he got last year, this is going to be even more this year. But I like what Augusta said about Coach Beamer. You got the first thing a coach has to do before you ever wins a game, before you ever plays a game, you got to get those players to believe in you. They got to believe that whatever coming out your mouth, that they can go out there and execute it. And you know, I've never seen a player come on a team, and the first time you've seen him, and then he's sitting, instead of standing over there to the left with the coaches, he's sitting with the players, and then they put it up, and they see him out there slinging it, and they saying, "Look, this guy can do it." That's a coach that understands. If I'm going to bring a new player out here, I got to make sure this, because my team is going to be looking at me sideways. If they're like, wait a minute, that's the guy that be over there with the wide receivers. Well, now he throws to them, and dare I say, if Zeb Nolan can become the starter and BJ have a halfway decent season, that gives Coach Beamer another out, because now whenever you go from your starter to your backup, the even the Gamecock faithful, they're gonna be saying to themselves, okay, we got to kind of deal with that. But BJ and Kevin, he can go out there and sling that thing. Who knows? But this is the wild card of the SEC East this year. You don't know what to expect from this South Carolina team, and that's what makes them dangerous. If nobody expects you to win, you can go out there and play loose. But I'm gonna tell you, that third game of the season with those two injuries we talked about week one, with Tyreek and obviously and Darnell Washington, that Georgia game get very, very interesting. Not saying Georgia gonna lose.
Depends on if Luke Doty's also. I mean, BJ, if Luke Doty's not your quarterback, you have taken a huge step back. I mean, that's just plain and simple.
Yeah, I think a lot for South Carolina is going to depend on the health of Doty. As Augusta said, he was clearly the starter. He was the guy, and now you have some questions about his availability. So a big storyline there for the Gamecocks.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. Take 3 around the corner as well. And when we come back, is it good to have a vocal owner, or sometimes should they just support the team? We'll get back to that when we return. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here. 3 and Out. Good to have you here. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. A lot to get to coming up in hour number 2. But first, I know the Mets are in a little bit of a tailspin, but I know everybody likes Steve Cohen, their new owner. But sometimes maybe you got to just sit back and take it. He put out on Twitter. It's caught a lot of flag for that. Steve Cohen on Twitter. It's hard to understand how professional hitters can be this unproductive. The best teams have a more disciplined approach. The slugging and OPS numbers don't lie. And I know he got a lot of folks saying, listen, you own the team. We get it. Just sit this one out. I mean, you kind of sound like a caller to a program like this. We're like, oh, why can't these guys get it done? You're the owner. You should let everybody else do that. You don't need to do that out in public for everybody to see. My take.
Yeah, I don't know that this helps with the motivation or the focus. I think in some ways this becomes an extra kind of point of distraction or, something else the team has to think about or deal with. Now, clearly, the Mets have not been playing good baseball. Went from, a 7-game lead to now they're, 3 or 4 games back, and you understand that. But, yeah, this I don't think this helps.
Mr. Cohen, just because you're an owner don't mean you're the smartest guy in the room. That means you're the richest guy in the room. You're the wealthiest guy in the room. I'm going to say this, and maybe we're going to have to make this a segment, Kevin and BJ. This is going to be known as, who is you? Like, who is you to be telling me what I need to be doing? Once again.
Well, he owns the team, so that there's at least that. But I get
he owns the team. But this thing, Kevin, you think the owner, you think the Yankees going to do that? You think the Dodgers going to do that? Now, could you be thinking it, or do we think things about the Braves silently that we don't say publicly? Yes. But we're also not the owner. The owner's not going to come out and go, these guys stink. They can't even hit the ball. Dude, they can hear you. So I understand we get frustrated. But this is why the Mets will always be at the little boy table during Thanksgiving. This is why. Stuff like this.
Steve Cohen, obviously not afraid to ruffle some feathers, came in and spent a lot of money there to try to make that Mets team better. And obviously they are in a tailspin. We'll come back. Take 3 coming up next. You're on 3 and Out. Great to be here with you. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. A lot to get to here this hour. We'll get you the very latest on all the college football news and notes, including the very latest from Georgia. I had a couple more injuries there at practice yesterday. We'll tell you who they are and what their status will be moving forward here. As potentially affects the Clemson game moving forward. We'll get to that. Who are some of the most important players in college football? Bill Connolly, ESPN, outlined some of those. Who does he think is the most important player in college football in 2021? So we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take 1. Is it ever a good thing when you see your team's player or coach trending on Twitter? IU Today with Scott Frost. We'll get into that coming up in just a little bit, but some of the allegations there at Nebraska. But is it a good thing if you see your favorite team or coach or player trending?
Yeah, probably not. Whether it's, a violation or injury news or whatever. The only time where you think, oh yeah, this is awesome, we're trending, is like if you're playing the big Saturday night game or Saturday afternoon game, and one of the star players on your team, has a highlight to remember, a highlight that goes viral, or, a big play, or you went, then yes, then you're like, oh, okay, it's Saturday night. My team's playing a, top 15 team. We had a big play. We had a signature play. We won, a highlight. Everybody's talking about us. But when it's not game day, it's probably not productive.
It's never ever good because you almost scared to click on it, right? You see your coach, you like, man, oh my freaking God, like what is it now? And if you got the type of coach I got, and the coach of my alma mater, good Lord, is it because he's starting fights at halftime? Is he dancing or whatever you call that he does after the game? Is he got on a Darth Vader outfit? It's never ever good, Kevin, because even if it's good, if it's anything other than a contract extension, people are gonna make it bad because this is what they do with coaches. Even if it's good, everything you've ever done bad, they're going to find it. Just so y'all know who this person really is, let me show you this and let me show you that. Coaches are never, ever good when their names are trending, never, ever in life, unless it's Nick Saban. And, well, it's probably because he just added another M to his already 10 M. So if it's anybody other than Nick Saban, it ain't good.
No, you're probably right. I mean, look, you see it trending on Twitter, like you said, you hit it and you go, do I really want to see what this is all about at the end of the day? I think Ben, you look back and who was it a couple years? Why am I drawing a blank? I'm looking it up here. When you saw Jim McElwain trending on Twitter, that probably wasn't good.
And this is something that's not talked about enough. Once a player, always a player, right? So you adopt the good and the bad of that team. So I'm walking around, people going, hey man, what's wrong with y'all coach? I'm like, what you mean? What's up with them Sharks, man? What you talking about, bro? You ain't seen it? And it's like they'll have it ready for you on their phone. I'm like, and I'm looking like, what the hell? No comment. I don't know what. I don't know. That's called coach creativity right there. I ain't never seen outside of his highly powered offenses. That's why he got the head coach job in Central Michigan. Lying on his resume. I'm just saying, yes, Kevin, unfortunately, when you talk about coaches at Florida, we give you a lot of material. Even the good ones give you some good material. So,
all right, moving along to take 2. Obviously, the least surprising NIL news here so far, Alabama's DeQuincy Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think they actually changed it on the official roster, so his name says Kool-Aid McKinstry. He has signed an NIL deal with anyone? Kool-Aid. What players from the past do you think would have a similar, just obvious sponsorship potential opportunity there?
Yeah, the Kool-Aid one is great. I was thinking about this in the show meeting. We were going over some possibilities, and I'm, trying to be clever and come up with, some that maybe nobody else is thinking about. And then I just realized it's so perfect. I can't think of another one. It's Cadillac Williams with Cadillac or GM but Cadillac. It's Carnell Cadillac Williams. I mean, everybody knows him. He's one of the great players in the history of the league, and even when he was at Auburn, was a superstar. And you're talking about your name is a brand, your name is a commercial. Cadillac Williams. So look, there are some other good ones, but I cannot imagine one being better than that.
I mean, when I started going through BJ. I mean, you got a lot. I mean, Booger McFarland could have been with Boogie Whites. If you got kids, they got the little Booger McFarland could have did that. I mean, Giannis is in the league now, right? Some kind of way Giannis and Javon Curse need to do something because they both called a freak. They both are called a freak, so maybe you got the Greek freaking, the freak from Florida. But the one that people ain't talking about, Champ Bailey. I mean, Champ Sports. I mean, it's there, right? Champ Bailey, Champ Sports, that would be good. But Twix would be, who would be with Twix? That would be old Deuce McAllister. Because I couldn't find nothing to give him Twix, pick a side. But yeah, you got some great names, BJ. I don't know how they would do it, but old John Connor gonna have to get in contact with the governor, the Terminator, because I didn't even know John the Terminator Connor, in college, but it ain't gonna get much better than Cadillac Williams. But you want to create some division? Let Cadillac pull up in that old CTS. I'm like, what? I can't even get my neon. Hey man, that's why I went to Florida, man. I take the neon. I don't got to have a CTS.
Yeah, Cadillac Williams is probably the best one. I think if you order like some restaurant pork chop, Womack would have been good. Pig Prather would have been a good one. You could have thrown out there as well. All right, moving along. Take 3 today is National Couples Day. I'm not going to ask you to tell me his tale of romance, but which quarterback wide receiver combo will connect the most in the SEC, ACC, or Sun Belt here in 2021?
Yeah, I really think you're going to see incredible production from DJ Uiagalelei and Justin Ross. Ross is the next in line, the next superstar at wide receiver U, maybe outside of Alabama, the wide receiver U, Clemson. And I think that he's going to return to form. You saw as a freshman, he had over 1,000 yards as a true freshman and was a great playmaker downfield, right? I mean, certain receivers are better in the slot. Certain receivers are in the intermediate game. I think Ross can do it all, but he's at his best when it's one-on-one downfield. I mean, he is a home run waiting to happen. And one of the things that really impressed me last year about Uiagalelei was his touch on downfield passes. Sometimes those are the hardest to kind of find success with because you have to wait for the route to develop. You have to stand in the pocket. And especially when you don't have a lot of experience, it can be easier to kind of check down and try to move the ball that way. But Uiagalelei was throwing the ball downfield, looked very comfortable, has a great touch on his downfield passes. And Clemson's going to spread the field and throw the football. And I think you're going to see DJ Uiagalelei and Justin Ross be one of the most productive pass catch tandems, big play tandems in all of college football.
I mean, BJ, I thought you were going to go with your usual suspects with Grayson McCall and Isaiah Likely. That was a very, very nice duo last year. But I'm gonna go with Max Johnson and Kayshon Boutte. I think those two guys are gonna go out there and light it up. Obviously, Max Johnson shows he's ready for the big time, beating Florida. At Florida last year. But BJ, something I know you like. How many yards a catch do you average? How about 16.3? That's what Kayshon Boutte averaged last year. 45, 735, and 5 touches, 5 tubs as a true freshman. He's only going to get better. And in that long line of great receivers that seems to be coming through LSU every year, Kayshon Boutte, he's destined to be a star. When you can have production on a team that's bad, it shows that you're not scoreboard watching. You're a guy that just goes out and play. But yeah, Max Johnson is going to be the starter because of Miles Brennan. But give me Max Johnson and Kayshon Boutte. But BJ, I do like DJU and Justin Ross. But for those of you who forgot about Justin Ross, that kid gonna be he's gonna be trying to just take DB's hands off this year.
Yeah, shame on you if you forgot about him from just a couple years ago. And again, a great comeback story. And we'll see what he is able to do there in week number 1. When obviously Clemson takes on Georgia. We've got so much more to get to here on 3 and Out, including who is the most important player in college football. Got to have him. Not the best player, the most important player in college football. We'll break that down when we come back. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to be here on this Wednesday. Kind of an interesting thought here. Who are the most important players in college football in 2021? And BJ, I know sometimes you say, well, important means the best. Heisman Trophy winner, right? Not necessarily. Sometimes the most important guy might be a guy on a team that's potentially got the ability to go 11-1, but he goes down and goes down to 7 wins. Who are some of the most important guys in college football? Bill Connelly, ESPN, put out a list of the players who could most dramatically impact the college football season and its national title race with a star turn. He had JT Daniels right there at number 1. Is that kind of how you read that Georgia's, the most important player on Georgia's roster in terms of not the best, but the most important player on their roster, maybe in college football, to their team and their hopes of getting into the playoffs and winning a championship, is JT Daniels?
Well, it's a lot of pressure, and Daniels is such an interesting player because we have spent much of this preseason and offseason, right, talking about Georgia as a college football playoff favorite, as a national champion. Daniels in the Heisman Trophy, and he's played in 4 games in Athens. But I think we saw the ability. I think that Mississippi State game, Ben, you talked about it last week, where you average 10 yards per throw. You have 4 touchdowns. I think he and Jermaine Burton went for almost 200 yards. You saw the ability, and you saw the ability to kind of change a little bit of what Georgia does. And I think a lot of people made notes and thought, okay, well, if this can be a season-long theme to go along with an elite defense, to go along with an elite running game, to go along with elite special teams play, this is a guy to watch. But yeah, the pressure's there. The spotlight, the opportunity is clearly there. I think when you look at JT Daniels, and Christian talked with him at SEC Media Days and seemed to be a guy that was very confident, very comfortable in his role. You're talking about a guy that, if what we've discussed comes to fruition, Ben, you're talking about him being one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You're talking about him being involved in big games. And I'm not talking about Georgia Clemson. I'm talking about SEC championship type games, college football playoff type games. You're talking about him being included in Heisman Trophy talks. I think, as we mentioned, one sports book has JT Daniels as the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. And I'm trying to think, just in my, and Kevin, maybe you can, Ben, in my time, covering college football, have there been many examples? And I understand he played a full season at SC, obviously, but have there been many examples of a guy playing kind of 3 or 4, 5 games, and then having those expectations of, you're going to win a national championship, you're going to win a Heisman Trophy the very next year? And I think he's earned this opportunity. I think he's earned this, talk when you look at what he did last year. If he would have had a few more pass attempts to meet the minimum threshold, he would have finished in the top 10 in college football in passer rating, ahead of guys like Trevor Lawrence, who went number 1 overall. So a lot of pressure, big time opportunities. Remember, at this program, pressure is a privilege. That's what Kirby Smart says. So I'll be interested to see kind of what JT Daniels' role is. And I mean that in a statistical manner, because we've heard a lot about, Georgia's going to spread it out and is going to go 4 or 5 wide. I think you'll see some of that. But I also think Georgia's still going to, with the running backs they have, try to line up and run the ball downhill. And, of course, it doesn't matter how you win games if you win games. But for all of the statistical talk, is JT Daniels going to have 400 yards passing every week like maybe Spencer Rattler will, or maybe Sam Howell will, or maybe Matt Corral will? I think you'll see some. What was it, guys? Was it the South Carolina game last year where he only had to throw it 17 or 18 times and you had the running game? I think you'll see some of that. And that's obviously a good thing for the team, but very, very interesting to watch kind of all of this pressure, spotlight, excitement, energy kind of focus on JT Daniels.
Yeah, when I first saw this, players who can most dramatically impact the college football season in its natural title race, I looked at it a little bit different. I do think JT Daniels, Mac Johnson, Bryce Young, DJU, CJ Stroud could do it, but I look at it different. I'm going to give you a name, BJ and Kevin. I said because I think this guy could disrupt things, because you don't know. I think it's Bo Nix. Bo Nix and Auburn could potentially disrupt everything because they play Alabama and they play Georgia. You don't, and I hate to see this, you don't know what type of team that's going to be playing Auburn by the time Georgia plays them as far as health goes. I'm gonna give you another name, D'Eriq King. I know that they got Alabama first game of the year, and we just don't know. I think we just don't know how it's going to go. And my third will be Sam Howell. they could potentially play Clemson in the ACC championship game and beat them. We have known one thing from the ACC thus far. You have to play the team that beat you in the regular season to be in the college football playoff, or you got to go undefeated. Because if you lose, I don't know if that gets you in because you don't get the help. So when I was looking at it, I said, man, Bo Nix can really disrupt this thing. Because he's already beat Alabama, beat him his freshman year. Now, tailed off his sophomore year, but guess what he's getting? New head coach, new offensive coordinator, new scheme, and he get to hand the ball off the tank. You talking about what South Carolina got to do. When you have a running game, it makes life so much easier. I do think JT Daniels to me is kind of what would have happened if Jamie Newman would have never opted out. I believe this type of hype would have happened a year ago if Jamie Newman wouldn't have opted out. But JT Daniels got some big shoes to fill. I mean, I understand that, with everything they're doing. But I just think Bo Nix got a shot to really disrupt everything. If the real Bo Nix, if more of the freshman unit Bo Nix steps up instead of last year.
So, Ben, you think Jamie Newman would have gotten all the hype that JT Daniels is getting right now? I don't know, man. Because
no, I'm not saying it would. Hold on. You got to remember now. Georgia was picked to do some big things in 2020. It's just the fact that, but remember the narrative, Kevin. Oh, Jamie Newman opts out. Then it went down. He's not going to play. Then it went down because you didn't know what you had at quarterback. If Jamie Newman plays, it might not be the same hype as JT Daniels, but it was going to be some hype. Oh my God, it was a lot of hype when they said, oh, they got the big transfer from Wake Forest and all. So I don't know if it would have been the same, but I just think that, JT Daniels looked better, half because of who they had at quarterback and half because of his SEC debut. I mean, when he debuted, you're like, my God, this dude. So I don't think it would have been the same, Kevin, but it would definitely been some hype to him, most definitely.
And again, I think we've seen. I'm trying to think if we've seen a Georgia quarterback get as much. Maybe Matt Stafford, BJ. I'm trying to go back and think in my. I'm right. David Green, maybe.
Not like this. I don't think not like this.
I can't think his name. The one that was there before Jake Fromm. He got a lot of hype.
Jacob Eason.
He got a lot. He didn't live up to it. But hey. We'll see, though. Kevin, you know how it is, though, right? They looking at JT Daniels to be the savior no matter what. George Pickens gone. Eric Gilbert, we don't know. Darnell Washington, they still, hey, JT, go ahead and take us there. It's not as easy. I'm telling you, when the hype is there all a full off season, SEC media days, all the analysts picking you, you can do no wrong, NIL deals. That boy just had his first Texas toast and chicken strip. That boy living life right now. But Bank of America Stadium, them boys, they gonna have on. I guarantee you, they gonna have on all. BJ, they're gonna have on all orange. Clemson's coming out wearing all.
You mentioned that game, Ben. You mentioned that game. All of us, and all of us too. Me, you, the three of us. We all in college football overreact to every game, but most specifically the first game, right? Because we've had all off season to hype it up. We've probably talked Georgia Clemson for 10 hours already straight, and the game hasn't even happened yet, and we haven't even made it to game week yet. We've already kind of created the narratives and talking points for we're going to say this if this happens. We're going to say that if that happens. It's going to knock Clemson out of the playoff if they lose. Georgia's got to beat one of the two teams, Clemson or Alabama. There are so many talking points, but I think for a guy like JT Daniels, the reaction is going to be very dramatic either way. And of course, that's not fair. And of course, that's an overreaction. But Ben, to your point, all the hype, if Georgia comes out and beats Clemson, the standard right up there next to Alabama in college football in week one, and let's say JT Daniels goes, 25 of 35 for 300 yards with 3 touchdowns, he's going to be, one of the biggest stars in college football. And Christian said this jokingly at the office the other day, but he was like, you never want to peak too early in the Heisman race. But I think you're going to see that. If Georgia comes out and beats Clemson and Daniels plays really well, it's going to be Georgia's going to win the national title. Daniels is going to win the Heisman. And look, you understand it. You get it. You understand those talking points. But the reality would be you still have a whole season to go. You have a whole season in the SEC. You have Florida. You have Auburn. If you get to the SEC title game, you're going to have to deal with Alabama probably. And then if JT Daniels isn't great, or even if he is good and Georgia loses, what are the talking points going to be, Ben? Oh, well, Georgia was overrated. Georgia's always overrated. When the reality is, if Georgia loses to Clemson, all of their, you don't want that to happen, but all of their goals are still very much intact. You bounce back, you win all your games, you get your chance in Atlanta. So when you have all of this hype like JT Daniels has, and he's a guy that is an incredible talent, when you compound that with the fact that Georgia opens up with Clemson, the game we've been talking about all offseason, and Daniels is going head-to-head with DJ Uiagalelei, I think whatever happens, the reaction is going to be dramatic, overdone, and we're going to be talking too much about one game. I mean, clearly.
But that's what we do, right? That's what we do. I mean, it's kind of like I compare it to the Hawks versus the Knicks. Oh, my God, this Knicks team is the best, man. They finally made it back to the playoffs. They get beat. They're not that good. I told you, same old Knicks, right? It's like going into the game storylines become dramatically different after the game. But JT Daniels need to learn right now. You can't win when it comes to the media. When it comes to narratives, leave that alone. Because if he wins, Clemson didn't play well. If he loses, man, they had a lot of injuries. It's but so the quarterback gonna always get all the praise and way too much criticism. But that's why going to Georgia is what it is. That hype. You are the biggest star in the state, and you played in 4 games. Bigger than Matty Ice, bigger than Kyle Pitts. You are the biggest star in the state because you are the starting quarterback at the University of Georgia. JT, don't even sit down, man. Everywhere you sit, it's gonna be hot. Because look at all the hype they're adding to it. Pickens gone. Washington gone. Eric Gilbert, you don't know if he's going to be there. JT, take us there. That's college football. They think if you got an elite quarterback, they can overcome anything. Right, wrong, indifferent. Welcome to the big times. Enjoy your Texas toast, young man. But boy, drink a lot of Gatorade because it's going to be that atmosphere. It's what Cody said. When me, Cody, and producer Jim was at Florida, Miami, he goes, dude, can you guys feel that? Like, yeah. That's called energy, young man. That's called let's do this. And Clinton Portis, next time, I'm going to go ahead and put that money up on them Gators because you would have been older than me, but I don't like losing bread. I don't like
Let me ask you this, though, Ben, about JT, because, your junior year, Rex was in the Heisman Trophy consideration. Is that right? Rex Grossman. I mean, what's it like when you're on a team and we've seen it, obviously, and it's become kind of the Heisman talk. Kevin Ben is there from week 1, but what's it like being a part of it? What's that going to be like for those Georgia players if that Heisman Trophy talk starts?
Just makes you want to play better. Like, it's almost like if I'm a shortstop or I'm playing defense and I got a pitcher that's about to throw a no-hitter, I want to make sure I'm on my game. I want to go above and beyond to make sure they get there. Because if they get there, that becomes the rest of your life. And man, you play with a Heisman Trophy winner, and the story only gets better and better. Yeah, man, he used to love me, man. He used to come to me before the game. Shoot, man, I got you, man. Just throw me give me about 15. That's how it is, right, Kevin? Like if you ever did something great or you help somebody do something great, it's, oh yeah, man, he the gun, but we the bullets. You know how it go. Without us, he's nothing. Without him, we're nothing. That's what makes it special. And like I said, JT Daniels, man, it's gonna be his last year at Georgia, not because he don't like college football, but he can't deal with all this. The man is only 20, 21 years. I can't deal with all this stress, man. It's a wise quarterback once said, just a game, dog. Just a game.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll come back some college football news and notes to get you caught up on. We'll do that when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Wednesday afternoon. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, news and notes from around college football. Georgia fans, certainly by now you've heard the news. Kirby Smart putting out 2 more dogs out for at least 3 to 4 weeks minimum. Tyke Smith, Darnell Washington, foot injuries. Looks like not going to be around for the Clemson game. We'll see what it means after that, but 3 to 4 weeks minimum. So you're talking about your tight end and one of your starting safeties done for the Clemson game. Which one of those kind of hurts the most at this point of the game?
Well, you hate seeing injuries like that, just anytime, but, especially you get this close, you've made it through the preseason and now you're going to miss, who knows, potentially 1 game. It looks like maybe more, but, you wish, Ben, I think you said a full recovery earlier in the show to these guys. And I agree. You just hate seeing the injury news. You're talking about two starters. You're talking about 2 guys that have received really good reviews in preseason camp. I think Washington, kind of that complete tight end, kind of that guy that can be a matchup problem. And Ben, you've talked about this downfield, but can also be a really effective blocker. Of course, Georgia likes to run the football, power eye still. And I think he's going to be very effective there as well with his size and strength. And then I think Smith coming in is one of the reasons you have the optimism you have regarding your secondary, because what you lost to the NFL draft out of the secondary alone was almost unprecedented, right? In terms of multiple corners, multiple safeties, guys that are already making, I know Richard LeCounte's made a number of big plays already, but guys that are going to be really hard to replace, multi-year starters. And you bring in Kendrick, you bring in Smith, and you think, okay, those guys are going to solidify and add to the obvious talent that we have. Of course, Georgia recruits very well, but Smith is a guy that got All-American honors last year at West Virginia, Kendrick at Clemson. You have a couple of All-American type players, and now to not potentially have Smith, that's a big deal, and it's going to put extra pressure on potentially a young player, even if it's not moving into a starting role. Because one thing you have to remember about injuries is the impact and the ripple effect that it has on the entire depth chart. So if you had Smith in at starter as one of the safety at one of the safety spots, and he's out, well, now the backup is the starter, the third string is the second string, and guys who maybe weren't necessarily going to get a ton of playing time might get a little more. Now, I think Georgia has great depth all over the field. That depth when you play a full college football season is absolutely going to be tested. But when you talk about the total number of injuries, a couple of wide receivers still dealing with some things. The Warren Erickson hand injury potentially was set to be your starting center. I know still may go at guard in the Clemson game, but these are injuries to impact players. These are injuries to key players. And I think not having, both of those guys, all the guys we've mentioned, is a pretty big deal. Unfortunate, certainly, to see.
Darnell Washington, his entire freshman season, he had some breakout plays. Most of his catches came, I think, in the last 2 games of the season. Smith was the guy that came over from West Virginia, BJ and Kevin, and you have to have somebody on the back end that can shore up to make sure that front seven can go out there and do what it does. The front seven of Georgia is going to be fine. But the question coming into camp was, how does this DB room going to look? I'm always hesitant when a key contributor wasn't at your school the previous year. I'm not saying they can't be great impact players, but that means that the guys that you had on the current roster weren't good enough for you to trust enough to put out there amongst certain competition, not all competition. I always judge players on the games that matter the most. All of them matter, right? But some matter more than others. Smith is going to hurt because now it's because of the versatility he brought to the game. Not just that he can nothing cheap, nothing deep. He's a for sure tackler. Maybe you could have brought him down in the slot. Whenever you have a veteran presence on the back end, look at what it does for the rest of your defense. Because the thing a good safety does, he makes up for mistakes. Somebody's in the wrong position. He makes up for it. Somebody missed a tackle. He's there to make the tackle. Somebody's lining up wrong. He's there to fill that gap. Now you don't have that. See, I keep going back, and I'm not trying to throw salt in the wound. Veteran players play with instinct. That's why they're so good. They know that I'm playing within the confines of the defense. My talent can take over when I know where I'm supposed to be, when I know what they were supposed to be doing. And that's what's going to hurt more. Darnell Washington is a tight end, and I'm taking nothing away from a tight end. You know I love the tight end position. You already know that. But how much of a factor was he going to be in week 1? Smith BJ, you just said that your wide receiver, quarterback duo, DJU and Justin Ross. Who they going to be attacking? They're going to be attacking Kendrick, and they would have been attacking Smith. Now, every time you see a DB look back like this, a cornerback, he's talking to the safety. Hey, man, he's telling him they got to communicate. Well, now that cornerback got to protect that safety now. When the safety's supposed to protect the cornerback, I think Smith is going to hurt. I think the biggest recruiting tool you have is what you do against similar competition. They're going to be watching. And Kirby Smart is an incredible coach, an incredible recruiter. You know what people are going to say? Right, wrong, and different. Why aren't they developing those guys that was already there? Right? And it happens. I mean, you want to get the best talent out there. So for me, I love Darnell Washington. You can't coach size. And he had 6'6", 260. But the thing about Smith, you can't coach instinct. So I'm looking to see who's going to fill his role. But Clemson was going to come at him no matter who it was. They definitely finna come at him now.
Yeah, they're going to test those new guys in a big, big way. Some other news and notes. Nebraska looking into some allegations to its football program that they conducted workouts last year when they weren't supposed to. And according to sources there, have a lot of video footage that they simply just changed the side of the workouts, had team workouts, apparently including some in the presence of the head coach and the coaching staff, which is a big no-no last year during the COVID protocols. So Nebraska investigating that maybe the NCAA and others said, look, don't have large workout sessions, don't have large workout sessions on campus. And Nebraska just said, well, we'll move it to an undisclosed location and get it done anyway. That's what's being alleged there with Scott Frost and the Nebraska program.
Yeah, and if this turns out to have happened, that's going to be, you're talking about a big deal. You're talking about a pretty big deal, and the NCAA investigating, I would imagine there would be some pretty significant consequences that come from that. When you talk about having practices you're not supposed to be having, moving them in the COVID climate potentially. Again, if all this turns out to be accurate, this would be pretty substantial, pretty big news, and that would be trouble for Scott Frost in Nebraska, I think.
You don't think they're gonna know who the Cornhursts are in Nebraska? You don't think they're gonna know who these guys are? This is the biggest thing in this state. I mean, and coaches, Coach Scott Frost and all these, you're not smarter than the NCAA. If they say not to do something, they're looking to see if you're doing it. Nebraska went 3-5. Now, I'm not saying that if they would have won every game, it would have been different. Oh, that's right. It would have been different because it would have shown that what you did actually helped you, as far as like winning and losing games. Scott Frost, since he's left UCF, it has been rough, right? These coaches, man, and once again, these players are going to have to benefit from – these players are going to get punished for something they had to do because of what the coach said. They're going to end up losing something. It ain't came out yet, but they're going to lose something. Scholarships, bowl eligibility, whatever. And I hate that for the players. And what am I going to do? Say no? I can't stand when people say, well, the player should have said no. Yeah. Coach, I ain't going. No, you're going to go wherever he says go. Unfortunately, I live here and they're going to corn hustlers in my backyard running play. Like, people are going to know that. So Scott Frost, do better, man, because now the players are going to get your team they're going to get disciplined from just listening to you, just following orders.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Nebraska finds or what comes out there from that investigation. Also, some other quick news and notes. The Big 12 basically announced that they're in line with everybody else, saying, look, if you can't play for any reason, it's a forfeit. So obviously at this point, the reason everybody would talk about would be COVID-19. But if for whatever reason you don't have enough players, you can't play, it's going to be a forfeit. You're not going to make that game up. Also, some former SEC news. Looks like Terry Wilson, former Kentucky quarterback, is going to be the starting QB there at New Mexico. And BJ, we talked earlier, South Carolina, with Luke Doty's injury, they added a grad assistant to the active roster. You don't see that every day, so they can have some more quarterback depth. Young man who played at Iowa State, backed up there at North Dakota State, but one of the few guys that has any kind of experience now with Luke Doty's injury on South Carolina's roster.
Yeah, Zeb Noland, who does have some big time college football experience, going from grad assistant to being on the roster. A pretty interesting story there, and we'll see what develops with South Carolina. Wishing Terry Wilson the best. Won some big games at Kentucky. Won some really big games at Kentucky, and then with the Big 12, I think they're following everybody else. I think it appears right. That's kind of the consensus around college football, that if for whatever reason you can't meet the roster minimums, we're not going to reschedule or try to make it back up. It's just going to be a forfeit. I think that's the consensus you're seeing around college football.
Yeah, the Big 12 is just doing. They just following the protocols. They don't want to be putting stress. I go back to the first game with Campbell and Georgia Southern last year. You see what happens when you don't got a full roster, right? You see what it does to the rest of your team. Backups are a beautiful thing, people. You can't go every single play. So shout out to the Big 12 for just making the right call. Shout out to Terry Wilson. And if I'm not mistaken, BJ, he broke the streak, right? He was a quarterback when Kentucky broke the streak against Florida. So I know a little bit about old Terry Wilson. And to Mr. Zeb Noland, do your best, man. Listen, you like Snit when he got to go to the bullpen. Just do your best, man. We ain't gonna put nothing on you. Cause I was an assistant coach or whatever I was yesterday. I'm getting fitted for him. Boy, life it comes at you fast, Kevin.
Yesterday, I'm setting up cones and tackling dummies and all the other stuff that the coaches don't want to do. They make the greatest.
He's the first ever coach want to talk to you. What did I do? No. You didn't do anything. It's just we need you to play.
I mean, seriously, man, how does that conversation go? I mean, it is kind of a cool story. You're talking about a guy that has played big-time college football. So it's not like, you just went and found somebody who had no experience playing big-time college football. But how does that conversation go? How do you kind of start that up? Hey, Zeb, hey, yeah, come on, he thinks he's in trouble.
It's funny. It's like this. Coach Beamer goes, "What's up, Zeb? Hey, whoa, come here. You all right? Man, boy, listen, you've been doing a great job. You don't got to drink that Gatorade. Man, get him a fresh Gatorade. They got you drinking this old lukewarm. So you like Gatorade's cold? Listen, I need to talk to you." And then they close the door. He goes, "Look, I need you, man. We have nothing." And listen, and everything is confidential, right? Closed door meetings, no cell phones turned off. You ain't recording this conversation. But it says a lot about Zeb. Because Zeb could have said, "No, like, Coach, because this is big time football." Because BJ and Kevin, this is what Zeb's going to understand. Why he's getting the benefit of the doubt now because of his position. If he steps out there, they expect results. All that stuff goes away. But if Zeb does go out there and he has any type of success, this will be the feel-good story of the year. We'll be talking about Zeb Noland in a total different light. But I'm wishing the young man the best. But Georgia is coming to town or wherever they playing them third game of the year. But hey, it's good to have a solid number two, man, a guy like that can help this team. They said he was already there for veteran leadership and helping that locker room. But if he's the best man for the job, he's going to be out there. So, Mr. Noland, hey, man, you can go, everybody could be chanting your name. And that's the thing about the South Carolina quarterbacks, BJ, as of late, man. You find a way to start rooting for them guys.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, including more of Nick Saban just laying into the world of college football. We'll get some of the highlights of what he had to say there and kind of the state of the union of college football, if you will. We'll get to that coming up in the final hour. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on Three and Out Final Hour. We'll get the hear more from Nick Saban, kind of the State of the Union, and weighing in on a number of topics. We talked about this earlier in the show about NIL and some of the things he talked about there, but he gets into the transfer portal in this interview with ESPN. He gets into certainly playoff expansion, auto bids, the whole thing. He really weighed in on a lot there, and we'll get to that coming up in the final hour of the program as we count you down towards Braves and Marlins final game of that series. Braves with a chance to sweep, and they're making all sorts of hay here in the East, BJ and Ben, winning while the Phillies and Mets are losing, and owners complaining about why the hitters for the Mets don't hit better. So
the Phillies lost to the Diamondbacks last night, Kevin. I mean, they lost a 1-run game to the Diamondbacks, and look, Atlanta's pitching staff was spectacular last night. You had Austin Riley coming through again. You had some clutch hits, but in a game that was dominated by both staffs. How about Huascar Ynoa coming out, going over, 5 innings, right? 5 1/3, and didn't give up a run. Had 4 strikeouts, so that was great to see. Welcome back, Huascar. And then Will Smith got in there in a relatively in a tight game, struck out 2, not a lot of drama. So how about Will Smith last night?
We're gonna have to put a camera on Kevin Thomas and your dad when Will Smith came into the game. We want to hear all the expletives because it starts with what are they doing? But hey, Kevin, even Will Smith is feeling the momentum. See, even he is understanding. I told you, if you're not gonna be the reason we win, do not be the reason we lose, Mr. Smith. Just saying.
It give me gray hairs for sure. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I mean, I was out here, doing just fine. Now look, I got one popping up here. Every time he blows the save, get another one thrown in there. What are you squinting?
No, I have gray hair. You have no gray hair. You don't age. You have no. Ben, does he have gray hair? I have gray hair. You don't have gray hair.
I'm just trying to keep my hair at this point, so I'm not even going to take my hat off. So forget both of y'all are showing me the perfect hairlines and just a couple of grays. So I'm trying to keep mine.
Talk to LeBron. You could get that all taken
care
of.
Listen. If I ever see LeBron, let me tell you something. I said, LeBron, listen, I don't know what you did for Space Jam and when you do your commercials, but boy, that stuff is slick. But other than that, it looked like somebody teed off on your head during the game.
Coming to a dome near you, Ben Troop. It's going to happen. Yes. It's going to happen. We got more to come here. We'll talk Nick Saban really weighing in on a lot of college football and some big topics. We'll tell you what he said next here on 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Final hour of 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, counting you down towards Braves and Marlins a little bit later tonight. But Nick Saban weighing in on college football, sat down with Mark Schlabach, just a huge list of topics that he was able to hit: NIL to full stadiums to college football playoff expansion and more. We're just going to hit on a couple of things that really stood out, but certainly not holding back. And if you're going to get an opinion on something in college football, I don't know if one carries any more weight than that of Nick Saban, Ben and BJ. I mean, right now, if it's like, hey, if I want to get the pulse of where college football is going or heading or what kind of the thought processes might be, you get a thought from Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney, maybe. I think those are the two guys clearly up there at the top of the list when it comes to those type things. And Dabo sitting down asking about the transfer portal. Will it widen the gap between the haves and have-nots in college football? And we've talked about this. Nick Saban saying, I think it's going to create less opportunities for players, not more. If you look at some of the G5 schools, why would you recruit high school players when you can take transfers? You can only transfer once. You know, if you get 19 transfers, they're going to be here. If I get a good high school player, he might leave. Why would you recruit high school players? That's just a lot of opportunities the high school kids won't get. I think he's speaking about G5 schools there who can get more experienced players quickly. Obviously, if you're Nick Saban, you're still going to go get the ESPN 300 and the 5 stars and all of that. But your thoughts there, Ben and BJ?
Well, I think it's a fair point, and I think it's something you worry about when you look at kind of roster construction and, how a team is put together, how you build your roster. Is it through recruiting and development, or do you take a portion of it, as we've seen, maybe a large portion of it in terms of your scholarship availability?
Who was it? Texas State did not sign a single high school player at all.
Right. And then build your roster that way. And, not only is that an issue, but I think sometimes there's kind of this anticipation if you go into the transfer portal that, okay, I'm going to have countless opportunities or endless opportunities if I enter the transfer portal. And, all of these college teams are limited to their scholarship totals. And not only that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, I believe you can only bring in so many players a year. So you can only bring in, I think it's 25 or whatever it is per recruiting cycle. So those numbers can kind of clog up pretty quickly. And, you want student athletes to have the ability to transfer. If a student athlete feels like I have a better opportunity elsewhere, or I'm not happy in my current situation, or I need to move closer to home, or, whatever the reason is, you want that opportunity to be there. But yes, you do worry about the negative impact on the traditional high school recruiting and on guys potentially kind of getting stuck in the transfer portal.
Nick Saban is also really saying something that I know a lot of coaches either appreciate or don't appreciate. He knows that if you come to my school and I get you out the transfer portal, what's the likelihood of you leaving? Very slim and none. Not because even if it doesn't work out of Alabama, you don't want me speaking up on your behalf. I go back to a situation where, and I know people don't want to talk about the Jamie Newman situation. He went to Georgia, opted out, and didn't get drafted. That's how much these big brands matter. So I do agree. Look, fair or unfair, some teams only got a competitive advantage by getting guys in the transfer portal. These are less guys that I got to acclimate them to my system. I don't got to acclimate them to college. That's what's the hardest thing. It's not the systems. It's getting acclimated to college, the work ethic, the structure. Getting up every day, knowing where you have to be, and meeting the demands of football. Nick Saban, don't he sound like he complaining when he's really not? Henry To'oTo'o goes over to Nick Saban and he's loving it, right? And I'm not mad. I'm not mad at him, but he's really saying it's not going to be competitive. It never was, though, right? Like, it's never, ever really going to be competitive. Texas State had to get all transfers, all guys coming out of the portal. That's fine. It's not supposed to work across the board, but it works. So Nick Saban, he is making a point. But until it affects Alabama, it ain't a feel like, yeah, exactly. So
that kind of leads us into the next case where I think Nick Saban goes. He was asked about the college football playoff and auto bids, and he said, I don't like the fact that the G5 conferences want their conference champions to be in a playoff. Of course you wouldn't. I mean, I'm just saying that's only natural. But either way, he said, I coached at Toledo. They were conference champions. We sure didn't have any business playing at Florida. That's not the best teams. If you're going to do it, get the best teams. The argument is, are we getting the 4 best teams now? Is there somebody not getting in that could win? I think you could make an argument for Texas A&M last season, but we beat them by 28 points, and they had a good team. So your thoughts there, and again, I kind of talked to some folks off the air about this. Of course, Nick Saban doesn't want the G5 schools getting a auto bid. I mean, you're out there to protect your own. I mean, if Alabama were to lose to a G5 school to playoff, that would be embarrassing. Obviously, you wouldn't want that to happen. So, and it's about keeping the power conglomerated there amongst the P5 schools. So, I could see why he would have that take, and why he would say they don't need an auto bid or at least access to get themselves in.
Well, I think the landscape is different now, compared to a generation ago. When you talk about the G5 schools, their resources, the talent on the rosters, the coaching salaries. I mean, these are big time football programs. Players going to the NFL. You're talking about programs that have during the regular season and in the postseason competed directly with some of the biggest names in college football. We have the auto bid into the New Year's Six, right, for programs out of the G5. And I think for the most part, you've seen extremely competitive games and probably more success from the G5 standpoint than a lot of people anticipated. You go back a couple of years, right? I mean, everybody thinks about Central Florida beating Auburn, but it's not just that. The year before that, you had Houston beat Florida State in the Peach Bowl. You've had Boise State have success. You've had a number of different programs. Last year, even Georgia and Cincinnati. I know Georgia won that game, but you're talking about a contest that came down to the last play, that came down to a game-winning field goal, then a defensive play, but came down to the last couple of plays, I should say. And you've seen programs represent themselves really well on the national level. And I think that there's more depth in college football now than there used to be. Now, do I think that there should be a direct kind of parallel between the access that teams in the AC have and teams in the SEC have? No. And I haven't seen that argument made. I think the idea of an expanded playoff field with inclusion for the G5 is that the programs that play the tougher schedules week to week, the Georgias, the Alabamas, the programs in the SEC, in the Big Ten, they will be rewarded in a postseason format by proxy of multiple at-large bids for their conferences and potentially seeding and home field advantage. So I think the idea as you move forward with a expanded playoff is that absolutely you reward and create more space, for lack of a better phrase, for programs out of the SEC and the Big Ten and, maybe the ACC, the Pac-12, whatever. But if you have an Alabama or a Georgia that goes 10-2 and a Central Florida that goes 11-1, I haven't heard anybody say that, every single time UCF should be in because they have the better record. The idea is as college football has evolved and as more resources have been created and have progressed and developed across the country at various programs, not just Central Florida, but, look at Memphis, look at, the Boise States, look at Coastal Carolina, look at App State, look at Georgia Southern, look at all these programs as the opportunities to play more nationally spotlighted games, more P5, G5 games have occurred during the regular season. You've seen the growth from the G5. And I think we're to the point, and Kevin, I don't get long-winded here, but you said this a long time ago, back when I was listening to you when I was in grade school, man, is you said, look, if you're going to be in Division I FBS, be in Division I FBS. And right now there is no pathway for a solid chunk of teams in the FBS to even mathematically, hypothetically compete for a national championship. And that's not okay. You got to have a pathway. And I think the G5 has earned that. And you're not talking about half the bids going to the G5, but there's got to be an opportunity to get there. You got to have inclusion. You have to have at least one representative. College football has evolved, and the postseason format needs to reflect that.
College football has evolved, but the one thing that Nick Saban is really talking about the most is what really helps big-time brands, what really helps big-time teams is perception. You're going to always get the perception that you got better football at the higher level because of who you play and who you are. But why is it? And I'm not talking about with Alabama or Clemson or, Ohio State or maybe, Oklahoma plays somebody, right? Or the Georgias, right? Why is it every time they play these teams, when it's competitive, the bigger brand didn't really want to be there? Man, they ain't really want to play, man. You know they just let those – no. And like I said, big-time football, the Sun Belt, they the best example, big-time football. The Sun Belt has played everybody in these big schools tough. Every time they line up against somebody, they play them tough. Because, BJ, think about this. The top 5 recruiting teams in the country are probably the top 5 teams in the country. It is a huge drop-off. It is a huge. It's not that, hey, man, they just didn't have a good day. No, they got beat. Troy went to LSU and beat them. Louisiana Monroe should have beaten South Carolina at South Carolina. Georgia Southern beat Florida at Florida. It is not far and ahead away. Now, SEC is the biggest brand, but the SEC is more Vanderbilt than Alabama. That's what people don't want to. If you got a team that cannot win a game in the SEC, and they've been in that since, that's more of the barometer. Because Vanderbilt, if they can't beat Alabama, what, you put them in another conference, you think they're gonna ball? Lies. It's not gonna just happen like that.
Yeah. Again, he had one more thing I wanted to hit on because I find it, just fascinating about college football. It's ever evolving and changing and getting into conference consolidation. We heard about the Pac-12, Big 12, or Pac-12, Big 10, and ACC rather, discussing an alliance when it comes to scheduling and things of that nature. And Nick Saban was asked if SEC teams are playing 9 or potentially 10 SEC games and the playoff is expanded, that means there'll be less opportunities for Group of 5 and FCS programs to schedule guaranteed games and supplement a large portion of their athletic budgets. Does that concern you? And he said, look, I'm not opposed to just giving them money so they can have programs, but nobody wants to come watch some of these games, and the players are getting to the point where they want to play in those games. And he said, looks like the players don't want to play in bowl games. He brought up Florida. Florida didn't have several guys not play in their bowl games. He said, none of that is good for college football, and I don't think it's good for the kids either. He goes, the revenue sharing part, they're not going to be able to have programs if we don't play them. If they didn't get $1.6 million for coming to play these games, they probably couldn't sustain their program. And again, you're going to keep minimizing opportunities for players to play. I'm not really wanting to play those schools, but they need to get some money. So he's admitting, look, I don't even want to play these games. They need to get some money. But he said, look, people are saying you're making all this money, but they don't see where the money's going, i.e. we're paying, $1.2 million to the mid-major or FCS schools to come in and play a football game. I think that's at least some good foresight. I don't know if schools will be down for it to say, look, are we just going to supplement programs that are not our own? But that gives you the idea of what you're talking about when you say, look, well, the SEC's now got 16 teams. Let's just expand, do a 9-game conference schedule or a 10-game conference schedule and place importance on strength of schedule and watch what happens to some of those non-conference games down the road. I think that's an important issue, whether you agree with what Nick Saban had to say about it or not.
Hold on, Kevin, because I mean, in real time at KD Fletcher SC45, that's Ken. I know Ken. He says in the college football playoff, we are not getting the best at biscuits and gravy. Nailed it. Power protect the power. BJ Bennett was BJ Bennett college football evolution and being true with the Power 5 excuses when they lose. Let Sun Belt, American Conference, Mountain West, Conference USA, and NCAA_FCS is it. No, Kent. I am not making excuses. I am telling the truth. I said, why is it every time these schools play these schools, it's so competitive and they win? I am talking about the competitive edge. I'm talking about perception. The reason why Nick Saban doesn't want to play these schools because they are good enough to beat them. There ain't an excuse. That's the truth. Perception is what drives these big-time brands. You don't think so? Why? That's why the SEC wants to go out there and get Oklahoma and Texas, because that adds to the perception. I don't think college football is that different across the board. Really. You got some big-time schools that play big-time schools, and that's how they judged on. But when they play schools that's supposed to be beneath them, they lose. Nick Saban said, basically, I'd rather give them the $1.7 million to make sure they get to fund their programs and play each other. That's what he's saying, because the perception doesn't die. All I'm saying is Vanderbilt went undefeated in an all-SEC schedule, and they fired their coach. Well, what happens in a regular schedule? You see? So, yeah, Ken, I'm not making excuses. I am all for it. The best team should play regardless of where they play at. That's me. I've always been that way, but it's not going to be that way because branding is everything in football. It is free thing. And if you ain't got a big brand, they will decide what happens to you. And if you got a big brand, people will make excuses for you. Not me, because at the end of the day, I was a Georgia Southern Eagles fan before I was a Florida Gator fan. Just so y'all know. We still lost. I'm not saying that. But at the end of the day, I do agree, Kevin, with what Nick Saban said. Just give them the money. What is $1.7 million in Alabama? You can give that to that team as you were going to play. Because Vanderbilt said, dog, I'd rather y'all play them than us. It's still going to be bad for them. So no excuses over here, Ken. I agree with Business and Gravy. The best team should get in. And until that happens, I mean, you know, the NCAA, well, they ain't really got no power left anyway. Mark Emmert, he's really just a face at this point.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts, Kev. I do think, you know, as you move forward again with an expanded playoff, I don't think the idea is that everybody gets, you know, you have this, you know, you get 4 slots for the G5, you get 4 slots for the no, we're not talking about that. I think you're talking about a system that just accounts for everybody, whereas the SEC would get more at large bids clearly and would have the benefit of higher seating, would have the benefit of potential home games, but probably most prominently would have multiple teams in. I know there were a couple of models made of hypothetically what the playoff would have looked like last year. And I think 4 SEC teams would have gotten in out of 12, and you're talking about 4 from one conference out of 10. And I think that would make sense because of the strength of the SEC. But I think there's got to be a pathway for the G5 schools. Otherwise, kind of what are they doing? Why are they here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to kind of explain that would be like, hey, let's say you go to work and there are 10 of you employees who work at, you know, Corporation X, and Corporation X said, hey, at the end of the fiscal year, man, one of y'all is going to win, you know, $10,000 extra in salary at the end of the year because, you know, you've gone out and done a good job. And then they turn around and say, well, Steve, Bob, and Frank, no, you can't, you know, you're going to compete for it, but you're not going to win it. Like, we're not going to allow you to win it. Well, why not? No, you're not. But we all work here. Yeah, that's true, but you just can't, you're not going to get it. Are you the best employees? It doesn't matter if you're the best employees or the worst employees. You're not getting it regardless. But go out there and do it. These other 6, they're going to work real hard to try to see who can get it. But we're all doing the same job. Shush. You can't get it. They go get it. And I think that's part of my gripe with where we're at. I have no problem if you want to come to me with the argument of Boise State couldn't handle it week to week in the SEC. Okay, I'll hear that. But the bottom line is you made him a Division I FBS school. They should be able to play the same rules where if they get there, they'll get a chance. That's all I'm saying. Whereas right now, I think out of the 120 schools, regardless if they went 10-0 or not, at least 60 of them aren't even going to sniff it. And I'm talking 12-0. It doesn't matter. Just who cares?
Yeah, and let me add this because when you're talking about the G5, you're not talking about a team that, you know, goes 7-5 in their conference. You're talking about a team that had a banner year and that in many instances won games that would be considered signature wins. Then you talk about perception. You know, I go back to Coastal Carolina and Louisiana last year because anytime I would mention, hey, we at least need to pay attention to these guys, you get a lot of, oh, well, they didn't really play anybody. Coastal Carolina beat a top 10 team last year. And again, that does not mean that their resume is better than a team from the SEC, but to say that they haven't done it or haven't shown that they can, they beat a top 10 team. They did. But we view it differently because it's Coastal Carolina. Iowa State finished in the national top 8. They beat Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. They played in the New Year's Six. Louisiana beat them by 17 on the road. And that does not mean that Louisiana should have the same number of at-large possibilities as an SEC school. But I think it does mean that there's got to be at least some way for these G5 schools to have an entryway to compete.
At the end of the day, man, we always talk about what are we judging these teams on, right? You know what a banner year is? If you can win it all, win it all. That's a banner year. If you're a team that can win it all and you've never won it all, you've never had a banner year. So when you start talking about these G5 schools, they have banner years every other year because they ain't judged off the same barometer. You know who hasn't had a banner year in 41 years? Georgia. But you know what they got? The benefit of the doubt because of where they play, right? Georgia could have won it 41 years. Haven't. No one says a word, right? Coastal Carolina beats BYU No one says a word. And I think, and that's the problem. We need to speak up on behalf of these. We need to do a better job because I'm telling you, G5 schools, P5 schools, outside of a certain couple of teams, there isn't a drop off. There isn't a drop off at all.
Well, and again, we got a comment, I think, from Lee Wetmore there on Facebook saying, sorry, I didn't want Georgia Southern to move up just to play in a bowl no one other than Georgia Southern fans and football junkies care about. Lee, I'm right there with you. And that's, I think, what BJ and I are at the kind of the heart of is like, look, if you move up, at least have an opportunity to get there if you achieve at a high level. And I remember, BJ, you and I talked about this when Georgia Southern moved up. I was like, look, unless the rules get moved, you're talking about no matter what you do, if it's a great season, probably talking about the New Orleans Bowl in the Superdome in Louisiana. That's the creme de la creme for where you go. No, I'm saying, but that's what we're talking about.
Hold on, because I mean, once again, listen, Kent. I was talking about Kent was agreeing with me. I apologize, Kent, because Kent was like, man, I am agreeing with you. But shout out to Kent, man, about to have baby number 2, about to be a daddy time too. Kent, keep listening to the show and keep correcting me. But Kent, guess what? I know you a Kentucky fan, and we ain't scared of y'all, Kent. We ain't scared of y'all.
we can talk about this all day. We got more to come. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. How appropriate. Tyson Browning, Georgia Bulldogs, brings us back here on 3 and Out as you look at the Dogs trying to shake off a couple of injuries there. Tyke Smith, Darnell Washington going to miss the Clemson game, it looks like at this point. But a lot of folks, we've been talking about this, BJ, been really riding the Georgia train here in the preseason. Paul Feinbaum saying, quote, look, I think Georgia is primed. I think this is the best team that Kirby Smart has had. He had a really good one his second year, in quote, which was 2017. Is this the best team Kirby Smart has had? I mean, obviously the hype would say it's right up there with the best team he's had, given we're talking Heisman Trophy finalist, possibly the favorite for the Heisman Trophy, getting into the college football playoffs. A lot of people saying it may not even matter what happens in the opener. This team is good enough to make it to the SEC championship game in the playoffs. Do you kind of agree with Feinbaum's sentiment there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hype is there. I think potentially, it's really difficult and it's fun, but it's also impossible to kind of compare a team that we haven't seen yet with a team that is one of the best in Georgia history and was a play away from a national championship. And I'll go back to what I said yesterday. I still wonder, had that one pass been a little bit too long or too short and Georgia had actually won that national championship, how much different would we kind of remember or revere the 2017 team? But potentially, possibly, I mean, you look at the squad, you obviously in 17 had Jake Fromm, a really good quarterback. You had, I believe, the most productive duo in college football history with Nick Chubb and Sony Michel running the football. You also had DeAndre Swift, an NFL back. You go look at the playmakers, Javon Wims, Terry Godwin, Mecole Harbin, Riley Ridley, Isaac Nada. I believe all those guys are all still in the National Football League. I mean, defensively, Roquan Smith, J.R. Smith, Lorenzo Carter, DeAndre Baker, Tyler Clark, Dominic Sanders, Trenton Thompson. I mean, just big-time stars everywhere. It was a really good team. I mean, a really good team. It was a championship team. They won the SEC, and they were a play away from winning the national championship. And more so than even that, and this is the point I go back to, Georgia controlled that national championship game. I don't believe, and I should know this, but off the top of my head, I don't want to say it if it's incorrect. I don't believe they trailed at all in the whole game. The only time Georgia trailed against Alabama in that national championship game was when Tua made the walk-off throw. So Georgia, that team controlled and for stretches dominated that Alabama team. And then, of course, Alabama came back and Saban's decision to put in Tua became legendary. But potentially, this team, to match that team, you're going to have to win an SEC championship. You're going to have to get in the college football playoff. You're going to have to win a semifinal game. And remember, that was a great Oklahoma team that Georgia beat in the Rose Bowl. That was an iconic game. And you're talking about beating Oklahoma in a year where Baker Mayfield set the new single-season passer rating record, and you outscored those guys. So potentially, but I think that 17 team was just really balanced. I didn't even mention the guys on the O-line. I mean, a great offensive line. So maybe, but you got a ways to get there to be considered that.
I do not think this team is better than the 2018 team, regardless of what this team does. Because BJ, I mean, the thing is, when you were factoring in the 2018 team, that was supposed to be Jacob Eason and not Jake Fromm. Jacob Eason gets hurt the first play of the season. Jake Fromm comes in, and the rest is history. You talk about the backfield, they had Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift. You talk about the receivers, the Mecole Harbin, those guys. But those guys came back to do it. So that's what's not talked about enough. Though a lot of those guys could have went pro early. I mean, let's come back and do this. Let's come back and do something that we've never done or seen in our time in this, as Georgia Bulldogs and Georgia fans. The thing about this team this year, this is why it's so hard to win it. You're talking about impressionable young people who they live their life through likes and retweets and friends and all this other type of stuff, right? And all they hear is they're going to do this, they're going to do that. JT Daniels, Georgia, Kirby Smart. And then the injuries come. You know why they keep talking? Because they're like, uh-oh. So somebody showed Feinbaum and said, look, Washington gone, right? Smith gone. To go ahead with George Pick. The thing about any great team, a banner year, I keep going back to a banner year. Georgia almost had a banner year, BJ. But people go, man, if it wasn't for Tua and that throw and that catch. But I look at this. I go McCarron, McElroy, Tua, Jones. Alabama has a track record of quarterbacks that win the Natty. before Tua got there and after Tua got there. So Tua is chasing a different legacy. Dude, I don't want to be the quarterback that didn't win one. Right? That's what we don't get. When I walk into Alabama, I'm saying, dude, this guy won one, that guy won one, that guy won one, that guy won one. Tua was trying to win the Heisman and win the Natty. He won a Natty as a true freshman in the second half, had a banner season the next year as far as like stats. Never won another Natty, never won the Heisman. If you are JT Daniels and these guys, what do you compare it to? You see? 2018 almost did something that we ain't seen before, but they came up short because of who they had to do it against. Tua, people say this, Nick Saban is the only coach that could have made that. You're going to pull a 26-2 starter for a guy that's a true freshman, and they won it. And who was in the game? But think about it. He threw it to Devonta Smith, another true freshman. Wait a minute. Najee Harris is at the end of the game. He had a big catch in that game. So wait a minute, you putting a true freshman in the biggest game of the year? Who ended up becoming the all-time leading receiver at Alabama? Devonta Smith won the Heisman. Who's the all-time leading rusher? Najee Harris. Who put together a season we haven't seen? Tua. I'm telling you, they're just chasing different stuff. Georgia kind of wish they could turn all this stuff off, Kevin and BJ, because Feinbaum those guys, they got to say that stuff, right? Georgia is prime. But guess who else prime? Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Clemson. You notice you don't got to say things about teams that's used to doing it compared to teams that haven't done it. You don't got to say Clemson is prime. We know that. You don't got to say Ohio State is primed or but when it comes to Georgia, that's what gets you in trouble, man. Stop thinking you need that. And I'm not saying they need this, but this is what people do. And they keep talking about it. Keep talking about it. That's like Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence looked like a rookie quarterback his debut. But you know what they said? Oh my God, man! After he got sacked, he looked good. He threw a pass. Dude caught it. He got out because that offensive line ain't good. When it comes to the elite programs, they don't need nothing but an opponent, and they're gonna show you. They don't need height. They don't need all this other stuff. We expect DJU to get it done because he's at Clemson. We expect Bryce Young to get it done because he's at Alabama. We expect Spencer Rattler to get it done because he's at Oklahoma, and whoever Ohio State have, they're gonna have, right? Georgia, we got to see. Why do we say that? We got to see. Because people had Clemsoning, right? I don't know what you call Georgia. Right, wrong, and different. They will be the team they're supposed to be and lose to a team they're not supposed to lose to. So I got to wait to see this season. But if at the end of this season it don't go the way everybody thought it would, people are going to be saying, what happened? The same reason why they praise them. They gave them too much, man. Paul Feinbaum and them and all the experts picking Georgia and them to do. I'm telling you, that kind of stuff matters. When you flying under the radar, you can go out there and be yourself. But Kevin and BJ, I'm telling you, all that hype, it ain't good.
Well, the expectations are there because, obviously for Kirby, he's been recruiting with the best of them. He's got the talent in there with the best of them. And I think Georgia fans are anxious to see some payday at the end of the season, which is what they've watched Clemson and Georgia be able to do, or excuse me, Clemson and Alabama do at the end of the season, who they are right there in those recruiting battles with year in, year out for the top class in the country. But I think that's all it is. Hey, we put in the work, put in the time, got the players in, got the resources in. Now they just want to see the payoff at the end of the road, which is winning a national championship, which they've been able to see Alabama and Clemson do. And I think when it comes to having the money, having the ability to spend the money, you're not going to find too many people that are, holding a candle to Georgia. They got money. They got money to spend on resources. They got money to put towards recruiting. They have, rainy day funds that would, make a lot of schools jealous, make them blush when you look at their, athletic budgets. They just got that sitting off to the side. So I think that's all a lot of this is leading up to is, do you get the payoff for the finish that Georgia wants, which is they're right there. Can they get the ultimate prize?
Well, and that is why I think the reaction to this Georgia-Clemson game is going to be so dramatic, because all the excitement you guys are talking about all preseason, all offseason, even going back to last season, was kind of pushed towards this game. This is the game. This is the game where Georgia gets Clemson. If Georgia wins, it validates them as a national championship favorite. And what I keep going back to is that can be true, but you could also still say you got 11 more of these to go, 12 more potentially. So we're going to overreact whatever happens. If Georgia loses, we're going to say, see, they couldn't handle it. When in reality, losing to the number 2 team in the country, I think Alabama's number 1, losing to the number 2 team in the country doesn't mean you're not one of the 4 best teams in the country. It just means you weren't on that day better than number 2. So if Georgia loses, all of this all of a sudden isn't wrong. It's just the reality of the way their schedule is, and it's tough. They're going to have to earn their way to the Final Four.
And when you get the preseason Heisman favorite, apparently, and all that, the hype train is going to get off in full steam right from the jump. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, leading up towards Braves and Marlins' final game of that series. We'll tell you about that next here on 3 and Out. Braves and Marlins tonight. Braves going for the sweep. Charlie Morton on the mound to get it done. Braves just continuing to create more space there in the National League East. You got Charlie Morton tonight. Back in the lineup, Travis d'Arnaud back at the spot catching for you tonight. And this is a Braves team that's really starting to find some good momentum. That's what 11 of their last 13 have gone in the W column. I think they've won 9 straight road games at this point. So the Braves really starting to find their stride at the right time. Meanwhile, the Phillies are finding ways to lose to the Diamondbacks, and the Mets losing to the Giants last night, further helping the Braves' cause.
Mets are losing right now too, but no, it's been fun to watch. It's been really fun to watch this team kind of hit its stride and everybody kind of play well together. Ben, I think you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the Braves will have stretches where the bullpen's really good, or the offense is really good, or the starting pitching is really good, but we haven't seen it all together. We haven't seen all of those things work at the same time. And we have the last couple of weeks, and this team has really jumped right into first place. And I'm saying this understanding there's still a long way to go, but relatively quickly, they've created a little bit of a margin here in the National League East. So this team's playing with a lot of confidence. And yeah, tonight, I mean, a chance for the sweep. You have Charlie Morton, who I think is 11-4 with a 3.4 ERA. So you feel pretty good about Charlie Morton getting the dub tonight and the Braves playing well. This is a team that's feeling it. This is a team that might be the hottest in baseball.
I do think they are the hottest in baseball. I think they're the most dangerous in baseball. Huascar Ynoa being away as long as he was, and come back and have the game that he had last night. Will Smith going out there. I mean, I understand it because of his salary, because it just you looking towards the postseason too, Kevin. Snit got to run him out there. Look, man, you got to pitch your way out of this slump, and obviously he's proven that he can go out there and get it done. But Kevin, something you always talk about, putting a cushion between. Bigger than the fact that the Braves are trying to win it, and at least they're trying to get back into that wild card, right? That way they got a cushion either way. If they find a way to not win it, which I don't see that not happening, they still get in. But it's something to say about what Snit and Alex Anthopoulos have done. They've only won the NL East. I don't know anything else. I don't know nothing but winning this division. That's all we've done since we've been here, and nobody has been under more scrutiny than Alex Anthopoulos. What he took over, my goodness. I mean, I'm just saying. It's people in there doing, in there, freaking doing depositions, walking out of the freaking office like, man, where were you on? I don't know, man. It was crazy. But I'm very, very impressed with the Braves because I was not a big believer in culture when I played football. I didn't think that stuff meant anything. Like, man, that doesn't mean anything. Every winning franchise, whether it's college or pro, they have one thing in common. They have a culture there. Every single team. And this Braves team, people like, hey, man, where's Ronald Acuna? Can't wait for him to come back, still winning. Man, Mike Soroka, man, they should have never gave us the time. Still winning. The bullpen was struggling, still winning. Man, who they gonna get at the trade deadline? Still winning. Something's got to be said, Kevin. I get it. When Will Smith goes out, you be like, oh my God, man, you ain't got nobody else. But you got to run him out there because you know he's gonna probably make the post game roster, Kevin. You don't want to, you got to go out there and earn his money.
Yeah, and again, BJ, look, I think this is a team that is doing what you hope they would do, which was for all their faults in April, May, June, and good portions of July, that come August and September, they would play like the team we thought they could be. Now, obviously, you thought they would have Ronald Acuna Jr., and this team would be in even better shape, but you went out and made some value deals at the trade deadline that have helped you out. Jorge Soler got an RBI last night. To help win the baseball game. So I just look at this team and they are finally starting to play like the team you thought they could be back in March and April. And this is the team we thought, maybe not the players exactly, but the team we thought we would see when it comes to night in, night out. They're going to give you a good quality start. If you're not careful with that offense, they can put up 8, 9, 10, 11 runs on you, and they could be a consistent piece. Well, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a team that even on an off night is putting up 3, 4 runs. Well, 3, 4 runs with a quality start from guys like Huascar Ynoa and Drew Smiley and guys like that, that's going to win you ball games. And the Braves are doing that. And to me, it's no surprise they've made a little run. I think now, as you both said, the key is to open up as much of a window as possible. The Mets are scuffling. They're losing, as you said, again, today late. The Phillies are trying to keep pace. Your schedule is easy right now. The Mets and Phillies, not so much. You want to have as much cushion. So when you do have to play some tougher series, some tougher games, a loss doesn't necessarily end your season for you there at the end of the day.
Beat the teams you're better than. And that's what Atlanta's done a really good job of the last couple of weeks. Hopefully you keep it going. Miami, the Orioles coming up. So a chance to continue to beat teams you're better than, because you're right. The schedule's going to get tougher. But when you have these opportunities, you've got to take advantage, and the Braves are.
Yeah, beat the teams you're better than. Not always the case with the Atlanta Braves over the years. Sometimes they would lose to the teams that are much worse than them, and you're scratching your head over there off to the side going, what gives, fellas? But we've got the Braves and the Marlins coming up in just a little bit. Charlie Morton trying to finish off the sweep for the Braves here this evening. Then an off day before you take on the Baltimore Orioles. Beautiful looking turn in the schedule for the Braves right now as they are in first place and starting to pull away just a little bit. We'll see you tomorrow, a Thursday edition of 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.